Hello. Hey, Jamie. Hello, melanated reader. Oh my gosh, it's been such a long day, you guys. Hi. Oh, here's Dolan. Hey, Raymond. Hello, Nia. Hello, a book doctor. Let's see. Hi, Dolan.
Am I here? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and you are here.
Yeah, this is my first time.
Is it really?
Yes.
I am so honored.
Yay. Oh
I
God,
didn't realize it was your first time going live.
It is my first time. I was like, I hope I don't
No, you're
mess
good.
it up.
No, I can see you. Are you feel good? You're centered how you want to be and all
Am
this
I
good.
centered? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think I have enough light or something.
you're good.
Okay.
So, oh my goodness. Let me tell you, I had to get my mood ready for this because everything that's going on in the world. I'm just like, my goodness. Um, I'm so happy that you're here with me.
I am too. We finally made it happen.
I
Yay.
know, and I don't know if you remember, but I have the photo. I met you when you were at Busboys for Balm
Okay.
for when that came out. So we took a picture for that. But that's when I first met you. But I fell in love when I read Winch.
Oh.
That book, literally. So you guys, if you haven't read Winch, you need to definitely go read Winch. It is amazing. And I still think
That's
about it.
12 years ago. My little
I can you
sister.
believe that 2010?
It doesn't feel like 12 years ago for sure.
I mean, time goes by so fast. I'm like,
It does.
yes, I can't believe it. So, you guys, I just want to say I want to welcome Dolen Perkins-Valdez to Live Where We Wind
My
Down.
friend just texted me and said, I need a ring light. I'm like, should I
But
turn the lights
you,
on?
you have
You look
lights on
so
your.
pretty. I look so, I don't know.
I have my phone is sitting inside of a ring light.
Should I turn the light? It's going to get dark soon. Let me see. Let me turn the light on.
Okay. Okay, you guys, you know the routine. If you're new here, that's good. If you're new here, drop whatever you're winding down with. We wind down on Wednesdays. So whatever you're winding down with, wine, cocktail, water, whatever you're winding down with, put it in the chat because I love to see it. And plus, it's National Wine Day. So I was hoping for it to be a much more jovial moment, but we're still going to celebrate that Dolen is here.
Yay.
And we are talking about her. This book is so good. Take My Hand. And this cover is absolutely gorgeous. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So
You know what? It's nice to have a cover that has a real Black woman on it because so often the covers nowadays are all abstract.
yes.
And I feel like in publishing, there was often a belief that covers with Black women on them didn't cross over and sell. And so I was really so happy to see my publisher get behind me and put a Black woman on the cover and not like, an abstract art.
I was going to ask you how the cover came about because, I mean, we can see her edges. I mean, you can see everything in this cover. Like everything about her just comes through.
Yep.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous. So I want you to introduce yourself. I want you to tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Okay.
And the story. We're not going to do any spoilers, so you guys can pick up the book and read it because you're going to want to read the book. I was very angry when I was reading this book, but it's a story that I didn't even know anything about. So you have.
Well, let's see. Where do I start? Well, let me start with telling something about myself. So
yes,
my first book, Winch, as Jamise mentioned, came out in 2010, 12 years ago. And that was set in 1800s at a resort where slave owners vacationed with their enslaved mistresses. And that was a resort that actually existed, that eventually became Wilberforce University, the first HBCU in the country. So that was my first book. And then I took 5 long years before another book came out, Bomb, that came out in 2015, set in the 1860s, which is sort of a magical realism about these people who are trying to pick their lives up after the end of the Civil War. I thought I would write another book like August Wilson did, where he wrote a play for each decade. I thought my next book would be sort of the next chapter of Black history. But the next chapter, as you know, was considered like the nadir of Black history. It's when the Ku Klux Klan starts and Black people get lynch all over the place. And I didn't really have the appetite to write that book. So I didn't know what I was going to write about. And then I began to think about these girls in 1973. And at first I did not think it was historical fiction. And my daughter, my teenager, said, "You mean way back in the 1900s?" And I was like, "Wait, what? Way back in?" And so to her, it was historical. And that really reminded me that I still had to do some research, even though, you know, I was alive during this time. But what I will say is that it still does feel very much like a historical novel to me, even if she hadn't said that. Once I started to write it, I began to understand that. And yeah, I'm originally from Memphis. I live in DC now.
That's right around, not too far from me. You're right down the way.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were from Memphis. I don't think I knew
that. I'm from Memphis.
I did not know that. My family's in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
I have family in Murfreesboro.
Do you really?
Yes, and my niece went to MTSU.
Okay, I went to UT Knoxville. So yeah, all of my families are pretty much all of them are in Murfreesboro.
Oh wow!
Yeah, we'll have to chat offline about that.
We will. Yes. My cousin's husband has a church there. I don't know if they know his. I can't remember the name of the church though.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to talk for sure. So, where do I begin? Because like your daughter, she's talking about way back when it read as historical fiction to me, even though it's in our time. It's like happened in 1973. And so for you guys that don't know, this is a story. It's a true story about 2 sisters who were sterilized without their consent in Montgomery, Alabama in 1973. And so can you tell me how you came to this story and the research that you did for it?
So I knew a little bit about the case. My daddy graduated from Tuskegee. And so I had grown up hearing, not about this, I had grown up hearing about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment for sure. And I learned a little bit about this, but my daddy never really, I don't think he knew a whole lot about it, but I had grown up hearing a little bit about it. And one day I was just being curious, and I said, I wonder what was the case with those little girls in Alabama. And I began to dig a little bit, but I didn't think it was, you never know if something's going to be a book. So I just see, yay, lots of friends in the group. So this is my first live, so I'm like,
I know, so everybody's probably saying, what is she talking about?
Yeah. So I began to dig, and I thought it was fascinating, but I couldn't find the book in it. It's hard to, because with deciding that something's going to be a book, you have to know your whose story it is.
Right.
And I was pretty clear that I did not necessarily want to write a story from the point of view of the girls themselves, because they're still alive and their story's not done yet.
Yes.
And then I knew that I wasn't going to do it from the lawyer's perspective because he was a white man. And I toyed with the idea of making my lawyer a Black woman and just, taking over the story.
Yes.
But then I thought, if, I got to be sort of a little bit more true to what actually happened. And then I was reading this newspaper article in the Montgomery Advertiser, which is a local newspaper. And the head nurse who was originally sued said that it must have been okay to sterilize the girls because all 8 nurses who worked at the clinic were Black. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what? Wait a minute, what? And that was the only thing that was in there. I never found out the names of those nurses. I never knew anything about them. I still don't know anything about them. But I began to wonder what it must have been like to be a nurse working at that clinic and have something like this happen under your watch? And for me, that's when a book is made. That's when I'm like, I have to imagine my way into answering these questions.
Yeah. And so as you're doing, you said you saw the Montgomery, is it the Observer? The
Advertiser.
So what other research did it lead you on to discover about this story? Because I mean, there's a lot of historical context with, I mean, as far as the case, the girls traveling to Washington, D.C., speaking to the court. There's a lot of history in this book.
Yes. So typically, you know, my research process starts with like doing a deep dive in Google.
Right.
Then I take a look at what's available in the online archives. I do as much as I can before I travel.
Yes.
So I see what available archival material there is that's been digitized and it's online, and I start going through that. And then my third stage is typically I start cold calling. And I'm still kind of cold calling for the new manuscript that I'm working on. And I called Joseph Levin, who was the actual lawyer who argued the case. And after I talked to him on the phone for a little while, I said, I need to go to Montgomery, you know, and I told him I was coming. And he arranged for me to have an office that I could work out of, an empty office at the Southern Poverty Law Center, which was great because that meant I didn't have to be, you know, in my hotel room figuring, you know, going through stuff. And typically when I go on a research trip, I am very, very focused because I have limited time away from my family before they start calling. So when I go, I'm waking up very early and going to bed very, very late. I'm working. So it was great to have this office. And Joe got the files out of storage. They had not come out of storage in over 45 years.
Wow.
And he refreshed his memory and he sat and he talked with me. And we had a long conversation, and as I was talking to him, I was just astounded by, one, his intellect. He's still smart as a whip. He's in his late 70s, but he's still very, very sharp. He's retired now, but he remembers a lot. I don't even remember, you know, what I ate for dinner last night.
Right.
And he remembers a lot. He doesn't always remember the names, so he'll look through his files to get the names, but he remembers a lot. And at the end of the day before my last day there, he said, well, have you talked to Mrs. Jessie Bly? And I said, no, who is that? And he said, well, she was the girl's social worker. And I said, what? Is she alive? And he said, yes. And I said, how do I find her? And he said, I don't know. And I found, of course, you know, I did everything I could to find her. And he told me, he said, you tell Mrs. Bly. I said, hello. We went through something special back then. He hadn't seen her in years. But both of them have a real sense that they went through something special. And I called her up, and she was very nice. And I asked her if I could take her to dinner. And she said, okay. She said, very suspiciously, and, you know, with reservations. And I asked her to come to her house. And I went to her house. And I got there. The family was waiting to meet me. And I met her husband. And then there was a lady from her church who was going to accompany us to dinner. And I said, okay. And I asked her, where do you want to go? And she said, Red Lobster. And I said, okay. I hadn't been to Red Lobster in a long time. And I said, are you going to drive or am I going to drive? I didn't know if she's going to trust me to drive. And she said, oh, no, honey, you're driving. And I'm like, okay. And I took her and her friend to Red Lobster. And we had a great meal. And at the end of the meal, she told me everything she knew, and that she was the one who had discovered the girls had been sterilized. And she said, Dolen, when I saw them girls laying in that hotel bed, I saw bulls behind my eyes. That's how she described it. Bulls, you know. And that struck me. That was just an image. You know, I'm a writer, and it just struck me that she used that phrase. And so in my book, Sybil, who's a nurse, not social worker, I wanted to capture that feeling. And so I have her have a car accident after she's so enraged, she just cannot see. But the way that Mrs. Bly described it to me was she saw bulls. She was so mad. Yes.
And that comes through very strong. I mean, your writing is amazing. So, and that comes through very strong in the text. I was very angry. I had to stop reading. And it's also very hurtful, you know, because we knew, I don't know about people in the audience, but, you know, you've heard of this going on to women. And so Can you talk a little bit about that? Did they share anything about, because this was a federally run facility?
Yes, it was run by the federal government, and Joe Levin said that when Mrs. Black first came to him, he thought it was just this family. And he said, and then he discovered it was tens of thousands. He started getting phone calls from all over the country. And he discovered that it was tens of thousands of women all over the country who this had happened to. And he dropped the case against the clinic, and he sued the federal government. And it was a class action suit, on behalf, the Relfs were the lead plaintiffs, but It was on behalf of all of the women who had been sterilized without their consent. And the stories, are just horrific. And the question I had was, my daddy had told me about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, and I knew that had gone on for 4 decades, okay, 40 years. And these men who had syphilis, long after penicillin was discovered and approved, were not treated for it. They were left to suffer the terrible effects of this disease. And then, of course, after the men died, we learned that their cadavers were autopsied to further study the effects of the disease. And I knew about that horrific thing, but I didn't know about the Relf sisters. So I'm like, why aren't Black women's histories, why do we have a movie about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment and we don't have something about these women? Why is that? Why is it that our histories often get swept under the rug? I don't understand that.
And it's typically it is Black women,
It is. I mean, most people don't know the names, for example, of the 3 enslaved women who the notorious Dr. J. Marion Sims operated on. He's considered, quote unquote, the father of modern gynecology, but he operated on enslaved women's vaginas without pain medication, right? And developed these techniques like the vaginal fistula repair, which is still used today, on them, but we don't know their names. We don't know, Lucy Zimmerman, Betsy Westcott, Anarcha Westcott, Betsy, I forget Betsy's last name. But my point is that, exactly, I forget her last name. We all ought to know those names.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's Betsy Harris. These are women on whose bodies, modern science was founded. We ought to know their names in the same way that we know Henrietta Lack's name now.
I was just getting ready to say, I felt the same way when I read that book, and I'm thinking, okay, I've been to school, I've been to college, my kids have been through school, and I have never heard of this lady before.
Yep.
I felt the same way when I read that book. And
I had heard of the HeLa cell, but who knew it was a Black woman's name?
Yeah. Who knew?
Who knew that?
Right. Who knew that? And it's just, I think it's so much that I have like in here, it's like all of the trauma inflicted on Black women.
Yes.
From the beginning of time as we go through. And so when I think about these young girls in your book, 13, 14 years old, being sterilized, it's just, it enrages me.
It's it is infuriating. And what I ask my readers to do, I say, it's not the most, it's not a love story. I mean, it is a little bit, but not really.
Yeah.
It's not it's not rom-com. It's not a feel-good book. But what I'm asking my readers to do is to take a moment to go through this journey with me and to feel a little bit of discomfort.
Yes.
But if you feel discomfort, imagine the fact that many of these women are still alive, living with the consequence. Think about their pain, what they live through every day. And I'm asking you for a few hours out of your life to just sit on this with me for a moment so that we can make sure that this doesn't happen again. Know that it's still been happening in recent years. And we have to remain vigilant that we call it out when it does happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, like for writers like you and countless others who, go on the search for these stories and tell these stories, they should be taught.
They should be.
They should be taught. And it's such a shame because it's like we are relying on like people like you to tell our stories, thank goodness for that. Because like you said, they are swept under the rug.
They are.
Yeah. And it's such a shame. I mean, our contributions, the things that, you know, happen to Black women, it's just really, because you think about like the forced sterilization, um, abortion, you think about the maternal mortality rate,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that, you know, it's very high for Black women. And
It is. I mean, I think, you know, I will say this, one of the wonderful things, and this is probably born out of our pain, but one of the wonderful things that I celebrate about Black women is that we have taken that pain and we have spawned entire movements, right? Like
Mhm.
we spawned the Black Lives Matter movement, right?
Yeah,
When I say we, of course, it was two Black women, but I'm claiming them within our collective as Black identified women. We came up with the term. People use the term. I hear people on NPR all the time using the term reproductive justice. That is a term coined by Black feminists at a
yes.
conference in 1994 in Illinois. That's a term that we coined, right? And so I really celebrate the fact that we have been pivotal voices in the discourse on human rights. But having said that, we really do have a lot of, in terms of the reproductive justice movement, we do really have a lot of work to do because,
Hmm.
like you said, Black infants experience a mortality rate that's like 2.3 times that of white infants. Black
Yes,
women are more likely to not get prenatal care.
absolutely.
Black women, are often, disproportionately more apt to choose abortion, right? There's all of these statistics that we have to stay mindful of, why this reproductive justice conversation needs to center Black women's experiences, Black women's voices.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Let's talk about
Okay.
Sybil Townsend. Oh my goodness. I want you to 3 to 5 words describe her.
Sybil came to me fully formed. A lot of characters you work on, but she just came to me. And I I think one thing we have to remember is that when the book starts, she's 22 years old.
Hmm.
She is 22, 23. I can't remember exactly. She is just out of college. She's sheltered. She,
Yes.
her family, her father's a doctor, her mother is an artist, and she really wants to do good in the world. She really wants to do something for her community.
Hmm.
And she quickly has to learn some very painful lessons about the limits of what she can do and the limits of what she knows. There's an early line in the book where she said, I walked right up into that house with my bag of medicine, 5'5" know-it-all.
Yeah.
As the older Sybil can sort of reflect on the younger Sybil's arrogance, but she
Yes.
has some powerful, powerful lessons to learn. And in that very first scene, and I promise we're not spoiling anything, we're in chapter
No,
3
we're not.
right now. She, when she first meets the sister, she gets to the house, she hasn't read the file really. She skimmed it and she's forgotten that one of the sisters is nonverbal.
Yes.
How can you forget that,
And you're
And
the,
so I
yes.
tried to portray that without judgment, but I hope that the reader caught that she walks up in there, um, unprepared for what she is
Very
about.
unprepared. And I think too,
Yeah.
I thought like, because she had a little bit, she needed to understand her privilege, you know? And,
Yes.
and she walked in there and she was so taken aback by the conditions of the home.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, would you be? I will tell you this.
Absolutely.
I never had heard of people cooking out of a hole in the ground in a house. I've heard of people cooking outside, like a sort of
Yes.
barbecue situation,
Hmm.
where they, put something in the ground. But inside a house, I had not heard of that. But in one of the pictures that I saw in one of the newspapers that showed the actual house that the Relf family lived in, there was a hole in the ground inside that house that the mother was cooking out of.
Hmm.
And I thought I have to put that in my book because the fact that she doesn't have a kitchen for a woman like her who really loves to cook
Hmm.
is very painful.
Right. Yeah. the setting, it took you guys, I'm telling you, you have to read this book, and then you're going to come back to this conversation, and it's all going to just kind of meld together for you. Sybil went through a lot of self-discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you talk about how you built, you said she came to you fully formed,
She did.
But as you're writing the book, how did you develop her as the story was unfolding?
So from the very beginning, I had an older narrator popping her head up every now and then in the book. Every now and then, the wiser, older Sybil would sort of emerge. Mm-hmm. And one of my early readers said to me, I really like those moments where the older Sybil sort of pushes through. She said, I think you should do that a little more. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Okay. And I played around with it. And then one day I woke up and I wrote a new first chapter. My first chapter used to be what's now the second chapter. That was my first chapter for a long time. Okay. And then one day I woke up and I wrote the new first chapter, and I pulled Sybil out of that sort of, reflective narrator into a contemporary 2016. I just kind of pulled her out for a few chapters just so that I could give flesh to her, right? And so I wrote that first chapter, and I realized that she was talking to Anne, her daughter, who is also the reader.
Yes.
So she came to me by saying, this happened. I really, want you to tell this story this way. I mean, I just felt her presence, and her urgency. Like, you've got to tell this story because, I'm getting older. It was just a strange sort of, and I'm not usually that woo-woo about characters, but she really did come to me and say, I made these mistakes and I'm trying to atone for them, and I need you to tell this story. And so that was the feeling I got from her. Not that she wants Anne, her daughter's forgiveness. She's not really looking for that. But she knows that there's penance for this that must be paid. And, some readers might say, I'm trying. Some readers might say, like, how much penance is enough, right? Some people might say that. Some readers might say that. But the spirit that came to me was like, is it ever enough? Mm-hmm. It's never enough. So
one part that I actually, because I don't cry a lot when I'm reading books, but I kind of teared up, is when I forget which sister was speaking to her dad and was saying how she's, even though this surgery happened to her and that they sterilized them without their consent, she was praying, God's going to give me a baby if I want a baby. I'm going to have a baby. And so it just showed you how that young, that she didn't understand the magnitude of what happened. And it just really, I teared up and I had to stop reading for a minute because I was like, wow. And what level of evil that you have to be to do this. And so do we know anything about the woman who ran the clinic, executed this action? Someone took them to the hospital for the surgery?
I was talking about the real lady in real life.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, this is what I'll say about Erica believing that God would give her a baby. If you've grown up in the Bible Belt South, you know that we believe in miracles.
Yes.
And we really and fully believe in them. Mm-hmm. And in a way that maybe people outside of that tradition may not understand. And so it's a combination of her youth and naivete with her religious birth. Like, she believes that God can do it. I mean, if God can deliver the baby to, Mary, baby Jesus.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yes. I totally get it. Yes.
And so I believe that was part of what we're seeing with her. But in terms of the real nurse, this is what I will say. At the beginning of the book, Sybil and Mrs. Seeger, the fictional nurse, are on the same side, and
yes,
they want to help. And you know, the thing about the contraceptive movement, it was always a double-edged sword for Black women. There was always a fear, because one of the things that we encounter in the book, and again, this is not a spoiler, is that the girls are being given this birth control that's experimental at the time,
Yeah.
Depo-Provera. And so there was always a fear, particularly among Black intellectual radicals, that contraception could be a double-edged sword for Black women. And indeed, it turned out to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the very beginning, Sybil and Mrs. Seeger are on the same side. They both want to help. They're both hoping to give women more reproductive control over their lives. But there's a line that Mrs. Seeger crosses.
Yes.
And that is when Sybil understands that they have always been dancing very close to that line from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I will say, and, you know, I said this during my Memphis book signing, you know, the South is a complicated place, even to this day.
Yes.
And I always tell my students, if you're going to depict a racist in your work, you have to depict them with complexity. And sometimes my students get mad at me for saying that. They're like, sometimes a racist is just a racist, Dolen. And, you know, and because they call me by my first name, they're like, sometimes a racist is just a racist. And ain't no complexity. And ain't no this, that, and the rest. And I often think to myself, this must be because I'm a Southerner, that I understand the three-dimensionality of a racist person. And to me, depicting a character as just racist is like not that interesting, because I don't find racist interesting at all.
Mm-hmm.
What I do find interesting is someone like Seeger, who in her heart believes she's doing right, who believes she's on the right side.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that Jesse Bly told me, because there was this hospital, St. Jude, that was there, and there were nuns, and none of the nuns were, in my book, I've made it a Black nun, but in that parish in Alabama, they were all white nuns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were very helpful to the Black community, etc. But Mrs. Bly said many of those nuns were racist, for real. This is the real life story. And I thought, fascinating. How you gonna be a racist nun? You know?
I do.
I mean, really? How you gonna be a racist nun? I never even thought about that. But you know, what I wanted to show with Seeger is that she thinks she's doing good, but she crosses a line, and then all of her prejudices, come out.
They do. Even to the point where at the, closer to the end, this is not a spoiler, you guys, but where her daughter is trying to get the validation,
You know how okay, so, and this is not a spoiler. So her daughter wants to know, about her mother. She says, was she racist? Was she, just tell me, was she, or she's struggling with this because she knows what happened. Yes. And you want to know why I thought about that? I went to Jackson, Mississippi, and I was at Medgar Evers' house, and I got a tour, and we were, I had a private tour with this woman, and she really described what happened the day he was murdered. And there's still, to this day, if y'all ever get a chance to go to Medgar Evers' house in Jackson, Mississippi, you must go. There's still the stain of blood on the carport where he was gunned down. And he was, if you see video footage of him, oh my gosh, he was so smart and so charismatic. I mean, people talk about Malcolm X being charismatic. Have you seen Medgar Evers? Mm-hmm. He was just phenomenal. And his family was inside, huddled in the bathroom, and he was gunned down in his driveway. And she showed me where the shooter hid, like across the street. It was a nice neighborhood, brand new home. He had built his home custom. And I went back to my hotel that night, and I started to Google. I can't remember the shooter's name, and I don't even want to remember. Mm-hmm. But I started Googling his family, the shooter's family, the man that murdered Medgar Evers. And they were fine. They were living their lives. They were on Facebook. They had families. Yeah. And I've always just wondered about these descendants of these people who've done these terrible things. How do you make sense of your ancestor, right? Do you acknowledge them? Do you talk about it as a family? And I've often wondered that. And so by bringing in Mrs. Seeger's daughter, who's wrestling with what her mother did, I wanted to, on the page, wrestle with how the descendants deal with these racist. And I think it's the same thing that we hear often from descendants of slave owners or enslavers, as we say. You know, how do they're still making sense of that. But that's sort of so many generations past. But
Yes.
what if it's your mother or your
mom.
father? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one generation removed.
Yes, and those people are still alive today.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So let's talk about a little bit about the court scene, because
Where's
I mean,
your wine, Janice? Are you gonna have?
oh, I didn't even
I
share.
have to drink alone.
Let me tell you what I'm
My
drinking.
glass is almost empty.
I'm drinking a spritz from Yes Way Rosé.
Oh, that's so cute.
It's the pink lemonade, and it's really, really good. And they also have ginger peach, but that's what I'm drinking.
It sounds very refreshing.
It's very refreshing, and I needed that for today. It's just, I could, you know what? I felt like if I open a bottle of wine with everything that happened yesterday and all that, I'm gonna drink the whole thing. So I just needed to really drink something light and refreshing.
Smart.
You know, yeah, I was just in such a sad mood.
Yeah.
So yeah. Let's talk about the court scene. You know, I just love so much about it because, you know, Ted Kennedy's in it.
Yeah.
You know, the grandmother's, her jubilance is, you know, just to meet the senator. So just talk a little bit about that, how you put that into the book, because I mean, it happened. And so how did you, you know, incorporate all of that into the story?
You mean the court scene?
The court scene, the dad speaking. Was there a lot of research you had to do to, you know, to go find out that information, like what happened?
You want to know something? I could never, and maybe this was liberating, maybe not, but at the time it was frustrating for like a year of my life. I could never find the transcripts of the actual court case. And and it was because before they were digitized, right? So I looked at the National Archives. I tried to find the company that was listed as the court reporting company. I knew the name of them, but I could never find where their old records were. They don't exist anymore. I just couldn't find that court transcript. So then I struggled with, like, how do I write the court case? So I called my girlfriend who's a lawyer, and I said, Rashida, you know, tell me what to do. And she said, oh, just watch Law and Order. And I'm like, girl. And that literally is all she told me. And then I asked my husband, who's a lawyer, and he gave me a copy of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which is gibberish to me. I didn't know what that was all about. Then I thought about reading like some legal thrillers, and, you know, couldn't finish any. And so at the end of the day, I just made up a lot of stuff. I did use a little bit of that civil procedure. And then I asked a lot of lawyer friends, like, did I get this right? Do you say exhibit? Do you say discovery? Right. And I'm still worried that, you know, I got a lot of stuff wrong, but.
No, I think it's great.
If you sound good, and maybe the Law and Order advice was good, because if you kind of sound legalistic, nobody says anything.
Right. The more and more I think about, like, in talking to you, it just makes me, what else is out there that we don't know?
Oh gosh, so much. I have a million book ideas.
I mean, it's just it's very daunting. It's very sad. I just, you know, we've contributed so much, so many things that happen to us, but why is there a constant need to suppress or hide our stories?
Well, think about it. In the civil rights movement, you know, Black women were sort of delegated to secretarial positions, right? Mm-hmm. And we were the hardest workers. And you know, thankfully, you know, people like Patrice Conn-Cullors are, you know, getting out to work. For a long time, people didn't know about the women who started Black Lives Matter, or Tarana Burke, who started the Me Too movement. I forgot to mention her. Okay, so people want to erase her. And this is a woman who, you know, really called attention to what was going on for women in the workplace. So I am unsure why, you know, Black women have been so devalued, but I do know that we have. And my hope is that as we go into this new world, for example, after the Supreme Court decision comes down, which is coming, y'all. It is coming.
It is coming.
And there's no if. And I know some people I talk to are like, if. I'm like, no, when it comes,
it's coming.
we're going to be having some very, very painful discussions. And my hope is that Black women have a voice. I don't want to turn on the TV and see a bunch of academics, white academics, talking about it, or men talking about it. I want Black women, and not just even Black women like me. I want to see community. I want to see, you know, the leader of some of these reproductive justice organizations like Sister Song and Black Mamas Matter Alliance, and, you know, some of these organizational people who've been on the ground working on this issue. I want to see them on TV talking about what these communities need.
Right. Yes.
But it's already started. I was just listening to a podcast on NPR this morning in my car, and, you know, none of us are in the, you know, that discussion.
Yeah, that's unfortunate too, because I mean, well, the tides are going to turn. It definitely is, as soon as it comes out. So can I talk about what was the impact on you? So how do you heal? How do you heal after writing a book like this? But how do you have self-care while you're writing a book like this?
You know, I actually on my social media tweet a lot about self-care. I'm very into self-care. And, you know, I have to say my self-care looks very, you know, bougie commercial. Like, I'm very much into my essential oils.
Yes.
I have mala beads that I pray with in the morning. I take walks. I also, I try to do just stretchy yoga, not the athletic kind. Just the, you know, stretchy yoga, yin yoga. And so I'm very much into self-care. I pay a lot of attention to my mental health.
Yes.
Which, you know, I think any of us I was recently at dinner with this woman who is a psychologist who specializes in trauma. And I asked her, I said, how do you do that? Like, how do you listen day in and day out to your patients who have trauma, you know? So specifically, she specializes in sexual trauma. And she said, yes, can you imagine? And she said, I believe that every therapist needs to stay very close to their own therapist. She believes in order for her to do that work, she can't be too far from her own therapy, right? And so I thought about that when I went back to my hotel that night. I was like, you know, I'm kind of like her. Like, I'm like dealing with a lot of trauma. So it's really important for me to stay close to my own therapy about my own stuff, you know?
Right.
And I think as long as I am taking care of myself, I can do this work. And when I'm doing the work, I'm really feeling a sense of urgency and on a mission and trying to get it done and trying to get it right. But afterwards, when it goes out into the world, I do, when my readers write me and say that it was difficult, or my husband first, he didn't read it in manuscript form. He wanted to wait until the book was out. And he told me that when Mace finds out that his daughter, the father of the girls, has been sterilized, he said, and he's got all that pain and he's so pissed. He said he had to put the book down because he was crying as a father, you know. And so when my readers tell me that, I understand that. I get it. I'm with you. And I know that, you know, it's not the easiest read, but I just ask, just, you know, that we go through this together, and that, you know, you just remember that, you know, that this is real, that it's still happening.
Yes.
And for those few hours of discomfort that you join with me, you walk away empowered.
You do walk away empowered. And I know, I said, Dolen knew when she wrote this book that I was going to go down this rabbit hole and want to do more research and find out. I mean, you can't help it. And so I just think, like, your moment of reading and having discomfort, you have to think that this happened to people in real life. They've lived with this for all their lives.
That's right.
And so your moment of discomfort doesn't really matter. You know, that's how I feel when I'm thinking, like, you know, it's very hard to read. But you have to remember that this is something that happened to young Black girls.
Yes. It is. And I just hope, you know, I know we are inundated with tragedy, right, every day. And, you know, you mentioned the school shooting, and that has been very difficult for me to process.
Yes.
You know, my second grader lost her tooth last night, and it was chaos in the house because I had to pull it. And
I saw your post, and that again, I'm tearing up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't.
You know, I had to, you know, the tooth was loose, but she didn't want to go to bed, and I pulled the tooth, and then we couldn't find the tooth, and then she said, "Oh, I can't wait to get my money," and we didn't have any cash in the house, and we were scrambling, and you know, and I put the tooth in the Ziploc bag, and you know, and then she had this crazy looking mouth, and I was thinking about those families that won't have that anymore, and but you know, I feel like I can't be incapacitated by that grief. I have to continue, you know, to just work, to do whatever we can. I think probably the most infuriating political issue to me is gun control.
Mm-hmm.
Out of all the political issues, that may be the most where I feel is helpless. I just feel helpless. I just feel absolutely helpless. But, you know, I think it's just important for us to not disappear. It's very easy, I think, in contemporary society to disappear into social media or into comfort zones or into denial. It's just very, very easy to numb ourselves.
Yes.
You know, we've got everybody's eating edibles and doing all kinds of stuff, you know, and it's fine. I don't have anything against edibles. But I'm just saying that it's just really important for us to stay connected to people suffering.
Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah.
So a couple more questions. If you can share, what are you working on next? Because I know something's coming.
You know, right now it's a mess of messy pages. It's like, but I am under contract for another book, and it's due soon, and I don't have a choice. So I got to get my act together.
Got to get it done.
Yeah.
So every time I have a guest on, I ask them, I do like, okay, you guys, I know I haven't updated a time capsule, so don't judge me. I'm going to do it. The time capsule, we have a book time capsule. And so we're saying that we're opening up this time capsule 20 to 25 years from now. And I ask each guest to put in 5 books, any 5 books that they want. So we've been building this time capsule since last year. It's on my page. And so I need to know your 5 books. I can tell you my 5.
Okay, go ahead.
My 5, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson.
Oh, yes.
The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin.
Mm-hmm.
Men We Reaped by Jasmine Ward.
Mm-hmm.
Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson.
Mm-hmm.
Native Son by Richard Wright.
Very
my
good.
My bonus is Jazz by Toni Morrison. So I need your, I'm going to type while you're doing this, your 5.
My 5?
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to do 5. I mean, I want to do like 20.
I know.
So many books. You know, I am a child of the 80s. Mm-hmm. You know, I was just really affected by the Black women's literary renaissance. So I'm going to definitely put Beloved on there because it is, to me, the greatest historical novel of all time ever and anywhere in the world. And I'm a historical novelist. So I have to put Beloved on there by Toni Morrison. Another book that really meant a lot to me as a person who comes from a family that doesn't have any professional artists, or, you know, working artists, but our artist was In Search of Our Mother's Gardens by Alice Walker. That really framed for me what it meant to have an artistic tradition in your family. Mm-hmm. When I read Homegoing by
Oh my gosh,
I just thought,
why that's not in my, that should be in mine.
Yes, I just had never read anything like that. I thought it was the book that I wish I had written.
It is a phenomenal book.
It's phenomenal. I wish I had written that book, but I never could have. It's so ambitious and so successful. And what
I'm so glad you put it in there. I don't know why. I mean, between The Warmth of Other Suns and Homegoing are the 2 books that I recommend the most. So, okay, let's go. But I've got 2 more.
I would have chosen The Warmth of Other Suns too, but I'm not going to because that book kept me up all night.
Yes.
Okay, so I won't choose that one. So I will also say, you know, just to go back to like the 1970s, I'm really influenced by Corregidora by Gail Jones. I'm just influenced by Gail Jones. And I wish I could, you know, speak to her and let her know what she's meant to me.
Oh, that's
but that book really framed a lot for me, specifically when I was working on Winch, about the history of, Black women's bodies and what we've been through and how that trauma still affected us. And then I would say, I think my last one, I think I'm on number 5 now, is The Known World by Edward P. Jones. And I will say that I believe wholeheartedly, point blank period, that Edward P. Jones is the greatest living American writer.
Okay.
He is the greatest living American writer, and I wish that more people would give him his due. He's very, very private. He is, not a person that wants to engage publicly. And for that reason, a lot of younger readers sort of have forgotten him. But The Known World and All Anne Hagar's Children and Lost in the City are 3 of the most phenomenal books that I return to over and over again. And the reason I love them so much is because he gives ordinary Black people such rich interior lives. This is a man who loves Black people. This is a man who loved his mother. And when you combine that with his extraordinary literary skills, you have fiction that I think is unparalleled. I just don't know any living American. After Toni Morrison died, I said and Philip Roth was gone and he couldn't vie for the position. I will put him up against anybody that anybody says is the greatest living American writer. It's him.
We're going to add him.
I will make that argument.
Hey, I'm glad. I appreciate. Let me see if we have any questions. I don't think there's any, there's no questions, but yeah, I don't think his books no one has mentioned one of his books. So that's good. I'm behind on updating. So I'm going to spend my weekend updating the capsule. So, I will have to say that when you spoke about Winch, and I know we're talking about Take My Hand, but I'm giving our audience some backlists to go to. I had no idea about this house. And it's another book that I think that really shows, the connection of Black women and how we're there for each other, supporting each other, even in dire times, And so I thank you for that book. I think it is phenomenal. I do. Yeah.
Winch is my baby. It's my first baby. And it's still one of those books that when I do a book event and there's a few copies on the table, every single copy sells. It's still a book that I get emails about from people who read it. Some people say they like it better than Take My Hand. I like Take My Hand best, but my most recent baby is my favorite.
Yes.
But I think it's a really important book because, let me rephrase that. I think it's an important story. I don't want to, sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but I think it's an important story because so often we heard about these women as seductresses, right? Yeah. Oh, they were seducing master to get what they wanted and all this other stuff. And in my book, we see that she's groomed for this from a very young age. We see that these women are just trying to survive. And we see a little bit of Stockholm syndrome, right? That you're so dependent on this person that you begin to believe that it's love. And then the question is, was love possible in the context of slavery? Which is a very important question. It's not only an important question in the romantic sense, like when we talk about Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson.
Right.
It's also important in terms of, could you love your enslavers, right? Like people talk about the history of the mammy and this myth that these, mammies were there, they loved them and they had this, fond relationship. And it's even important with people now who talk about my housekeeper is my friend.
Yeah.
Well,
we're not going to go there, but yes.
I mean, I don't want to go there. But my point is, like, there's a huge power imbalance here, and that is not insignificant.
Right. I just, one thing, there's so many things that stood out about the book for me, because I didn't even know, like, it became Wilberforce University. But the fact that they were going on vacation with their enslavers, right? And they were in a free state.
Yeah.
And went back. Every year.
Yeah. That was amazing to me because Ohio was full of safe houses lots
Yes.
of abolitionists in those woods. And I was just amazed. You know, people had died trying to cross the Ohio River from Kentucky into Ohio. And I was thinking to myself, what must it take for you to go back?
Yeah.
And what must it take for you to feel that your life was wrapped up in this person? And of course, later I learned that the very earliest students at Wilberforce were the sons, as they said back then, mulatto sons and daughters of these enslavers. And I thought, you mean to tell me they were sending them to college? I mean, when I looked at those student lists in the early archives of Wilberforce, I saw like 5 children from a Mississippi planter sending his children to college. That was a big deal to be able to go to Wilberforce. And, you know, and I would imagine because Wilberforce was founded in 1856, those young people were freed and were able to use that college degree.
Yeah. Yes, your work is phenomenal. Thank you for unearthing stories and letting us know what's going on, because we would not, I mean, we definitely would, I mean, I would not have known this. I wouldn't. At 50 some years old, I had no idea.
Thank you.
And so thank you
for
so
having
much.
me on, Jamise.
I so appreciate
and all the work you're doing on
Thank you.
Bookstagram. I talk about you all the time in my events. I talk about, you know, the primary bookstagrammers out there who are really keeping Black books alive and well. And the work you're doing, let me tell you something. This is game changing what you're doing. Yes. I wish the publishers would like pay y'all a whole lot of money or something, because
We do too.
I don't know. We love y'all. And,
yeah.
You know, I'm very, very grateful to you for this work.
You are more than welcome. I'm happy to do it. And so I want to let everyone know that Literary Wind Down is going on a hiatus. I'm going to be outside enjoying my summer, and I will be back in the fall for Literary Wind Down. But I'm taking a break.
Is this the last one?
Yes, you're the last one for the summer.
Wow.
Yes. Been going strong since last June, and so I'm taking a break.
Good idea.
I'll come back in the fall. So,
well,
and I got stuff going on with
oil.
diverse signs for the summer, so I'm definitely taking a break on Literary Wind Down.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I think that's smart.
Yes. So.
Hey, Jason. I see Jason Reynolds.
Oh, hey, Jason. So anyway, I so appreciate you being here, and eventually we will meet up in the city.
Yes, let's do that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you guys for joining, and I'll see you in the fall when Literary Wind Down returns. Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.